Hi, I'm Ryan Davis.
And I'm Kieran Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
Hey, Kieran.
How you doing, Ryan?
Pretty good. Happy birthday.
Oh, thank you. We're recording on my birthday, 39 again. Very happy about that.
Unbelievable. I mean, for whatever you're doing on the skincare routine side, share with our listeners because
I have to say, I was shocked to learn that you're only 2 years older than I am.
Those 2 years were intense. So
they were hard 2 years.
they were like John Valjean,
No, not with our audience, Ryan. Yeah. You don't want to bring the musical references.
With a novel first.
Well, Ryan, there's no other place I'd rather be on my birthday than ready to record an episode with you. And we got a great one today because we're doing one of our patented 101s first time in Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago, a city we both know and love, and I think really excited to share some of our picks for folks' first trip to Chicago.
Especially because I think at this time of year, there's a lot of tourism to Chicago, especially right in the center of the country. It's easy for all the coast to get there, north, south. I mean, it's a great location.
Yeah, Chicago has beautiful summers, springs, and falls, and brutal winters. I think that's at least worth pointing out to folks. Maybe not the dead of winter is when you want to plan your Chicago trip.
Even though everybody calls it Windy City, but it's not because of the actual wind. It's not because of the weather. It was because it was famous for bloviating politicians putting out their voices, their wind. And so it was called the Windy City for that reason.
True?
But it is pretty windy.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, well, I always just assumed it was because it was windy because it's right there.
No, but we're already getting too much into discussing the second city because we've got a few things we got to take care of right up front. First, just pure housekeeping, the Judy alert. This is an essential segment that we have up front because Ryan's mom, Judy, Ryan, he's not the most loyal son, very, very hard to get in touch with as he travels all around the world. So we like to do a Judy alert to put mom's mind at ease. So I have to ask, Ryan, where are you today?
I am in Puerto Vallarta, beautiful Puerto Vallarta,
you love
Mexico.
Puerto Vallarta.
If
I recall correctly, last time you were there was Christmas. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it's a good time to come on Christmas. So I'm actually heading to Guadalajara tomorrow, which is another city we should do an episode on one time. But Puerto Vallarta is, this is not the main tourist season, so it rains a little bit, but
I know you don't do well in rain. There's been many destinations I thought we'd have an episode for, and then it rains. Ryan doesn't leave his hotel room for a week and a half.
Yeah, well, Puerto Vallarta is one of those cities where it rains for like 15 minutes, like it's the end of the world, and then everything's fine.
All right. Well, that's good. So it sounds like you're safe and sound. I mean, the life you're leading, it really is. It's a life people dream of. But it does feel like for the summer, we've been really sticking with kind of more common travel destinations. And it's been nice to see. We've gotten some great feedback into the inbox, outofofficepod@gmail.com. That's a place you can come and suggest to us places you would like us to either travel. Ryan and I are already thinking about our next trip together. We just did Louisville. That was our latest round of podcasts. Louisville. And we're already thinking through where we might find each other soon. And another place to get in touch with, of course, is leave us a review, preferably a good one, though. I believe, Ryan, if I'm not mistaken, got a little bit of a mixed bag here this week.
Yeah. Well, first, we want to give a shout out to Stacy Faye, who left a nice 5-star review, who says that she really enjoys our banter. And she has an upcoming trip to Boston and Portland.
Oh, boy, do we have Boston episodes for her.
We have one or two. And she wants us to
We have
visit.
A trilogy. We have way more. We have a full trilogy. And our next episode is going to be Secret Boston, all about my guidebook. So, Stacey Faye's got something coming.
And do you think that she's talking about Portland, Oregon or Portland, Maine?
I'm guessing because she's pairing it with Boston, probably Portland, Maine.
And we've done a Maine episode, but not specifically Portland, I don't think.
No, have we not done? God, how have we not done a Portland episode? We did put that on the list.
We did like Down East Maine or something like that.
Yeah, Down East Maine, of course, where I went a few summers ago.
Yeah, but she recommends for our trip, and this is one that I've called out, the Twin Cities. Love
You
the
have
Twin Cities.
you've pitched this to me, Ryan, but I've told you I can't meet you in Minneapolis and St. Paul. I have another friend who lives there. And if I'm traveling out, I'm just not going to have time to hang out with you, man. I got to go see my friend Charlie.
All right, fair enough. So maybe you and Charlie can do the episode.
It is definitely on the list, Stacey Faye. Thank you for the suggestion, and we're definitely going to put that Portland episode in the to come.
And then Annie 3 Marie, 5-star review. She says,
"This is my dream review, Ryan."
She says,
my dream review.
Love you, crazy liberals.
That's the title. Love you, crazy liberals.
And that she may be a conservative, and we may be Romney liberals, but she still loves the show. So thank you.
And then she says, we need more episodes.
Yeah.
First of all, Ryan, I feel like, about 2 years ago, you and I said we were going to try to bring the politics back out of the podcast, focus down into the travel content. We want everyone to feel here Out of Office is a big tent. And I'm glad that our self-branding as Romney liberals, because, while we are, we can't come from a company called Blue State Digital. We're both big supporters of Barack Obama. I got a weak place for Biden. Speaking of weak, who's going to like that? Annie 3 Marie, because Annie 3 Marie, she gets it. She knows that we've got a real weak spot for Mitt Romney, and she's not scared away by what I'm sad to say our final review. We got to talk about. We're being trolled right now.
Yeah, Cornhusker 55 is back, and he likes to leave us a 1-star review, the same review. I think this is the 3rd time. And I assume it's a he, that he lives in Nebraska. And that
it's definitely a he. No woman would do this.
Born in 55, and he's left the same review 3 times, but he says that it's a woke hatred and an awful lot of liberal drivel. Liberal drivel, which we were going to call the podcast if we had done a political
absolutely.
one. Yeah.
But I got to say, I'd like to get Annie 3 Marie to talk to Cornhusker 55, because I feel like she'd be able to connect with him on a certain political level, but then she could open Cornhusker 55's eyes to what we're trying to do here. I want to reach out an olive branch to Cornhusker 55 and say, in your next review where you call us full of woke hatred, tell us a place you would like us to review for you. And, we'll get there.
Yeah, I think, we'd be happy to review any of your favorite places, Cornhusker. So
I imagine he's probably going to put us to some gun shows. Maybe, maybe we could go to an anti-abortion rally. Any place Cornhusker 55 thinks we should be covering.
Yeah. So Cornhusker, let us know. But Chicago, the city, I think that, everybody can enjoy regardless of your politics. And
right there in the middle of the country. It's a place where we can come together, from Cornhusker 55 to Stacey Faye to Annie 3 Marie. So, Ryan, I think it's time we take off.
Tell the cabin crew.
Flight attendants, prepare for takeoff, please.
All right, Ryan. Well, I feel like we should start where we always start, which is we should talk about our own personal experiences and histories. How often have you been to Chicago? How familiar are you with the city, and what do you feel about it?
I have been to Chicago probably 15 times.
Whew.
Yeah. So a lot of times. I mean, you and I worked at a certain place, and I had to go to Chicago quite a few times for one of their clients who was, politically involved in Chicago.
You're losing Cornhusker. You're losing Cornhusker. Pull it back.
And I've been to a lot of conferences there, and I spent weekends there. So I really like Chicago. And when you suggested we do this episode, I was actually shocked we hadn't done it before.
Oh, same. It is shocking and a little embarrassing, because I too am very fond of Chicago. I think I've been there 4 times, a couple times tourist, and then a couple times for work. And I've always thought it was an extremely friendly city, a very accessible city, very easily navigable, a fantastic food city, and certainly a place that you could fill an extended weekend, like a 3-day weekend, just pack it with great cultural things to do, great food, or, it could substantiate out to a week or more.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big city. It's not truly the second city, but it's a big city. There's a lot to do. If you're into sports, if you're into theater, if you're into comedy, it's a city with just sort of a vibrant cultural and sports life.
And it does have the distinction of being the largest city in the middle of the country. So, I think that people very wrongly, you and I, we like to celebrate all the places that you can visit all across America. But people who refer to flyover country, which is a term I hate and I'm disgusted by. But, Chicago sits there right in the middle. So it is easily accessible. And where so many of the kind of great cities sit on oceans, Chicago is distinguished by sitting on Lake Michigan, which, might as well be an ocean. It's so large.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And, one of the cool things that you can do in Chicago is actually take this Chicago architecture tour. And I think both of us have done this, right? I've done this a couple times.
Yes, absolutely. This is honestly, if you had one day in Chicago and had only one time you could do a touristy thing, the Chicago architecture tour, which is a boat tour through the city, would be the thing I'd recommend.
Yeah. So you go on the Chicago River and then it dumps you out.
It doesn't dump you out. There's not a waterfall into Lake Michigan.
No, but they take you around into Lake Michigan and you can see sort of the sights of the city from there. But what I love about the Chicago architecture tour, and there are a bunch of different folks that are offering this, and you can get really nerdy or you can get more general if you just kind of want to drink and hang out and enjoy the sun. Both of those kind of tours are available. But if you need to get on a boat for a few hours, cruising up and down the Chicago River out into Lake Michigan and just get a view of this incredibly beautiful city with this really, it's so unique to have this river that just kind of runs right through the city there, right through downtown.
Yeah, that's it. And that's for people who don't know the geography of Chicago, it does have this river that just kind of cuts right through it. And it's not like London and the Thames. The Thames is so wide that there's only a few bridges that go across, and you really it's a journey to get from one bank to the other. The river, the Chicago is bifurcated by a river that's quite slim, and there are bridge after bridge after bridge after bridge through it, and you do see these boats that with these architecture tours going on quite often below you, and it's super fun to sit out on the roof deck there, get a beer, and to learn about all the architecture around you, because Chicago is a famously beautiful city with a great variety of architecture. And whether you're a novice or you're quite skilled, seeing it from the river point of view, you get a lot of views that you can't get at that street level.
Yeah, and it's all different types of architecture and so many famous buildings in Chicago. And even if you don't think the buildings, you'll be watching and you'll be like, oh, I've seen that in a million movies. It's that kind of,
for me, it's all Perfect Strangers. I mean that really dates me. But it's all,
how old did you turn today?
It's all Balky Bartakamus and Cousin Larry, of course.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whew, folks. Well, hopefully we get the Perfect Strangers audience in for the show.
Well, and in addition to doing the architecture tour itself, taking the time to actually walk this lakefront, I think is a great use of time. So you've got Millennium Park, which is kind of the major. It's not central to the city, but I would compare it to Central Park, where it's like the quintessential Chicago park, and it covers a vast amount of the waterfront, and so you get a great mile plus walk that's right around the waterfront. And as I say, when people say lake, sometimes you can think small, but Lake Michigan is absolutely huge. And you've got a number of attractions and museums that are either within Millennium Park or that you can experience as you go further along. So the Field Museum, the aquarium, they're all kind of on this waterfront area. And that's one of these things that I think until you go to Chicago, you don't really realize, almost like the maritime feel that you get along the shoreline.
Yeah, it's a great city to walk around in, and that area is really large. Like you can walk for a long time through Millennium Park. I've spent a lot of time there, and I think there's still so much of the park that I haven't seen. Now, folks will recognize from Instagram, if they've ever had a friend go to Chicago, the Bean.
The bean. Yeah. So the bean is, this is like New York has the Statue of Liberty. Chicago has the bean. And what it is it's this huge mirrored sculpture. You can actually walk underneath it. And it is indeed in the shape of a bean. It was installed in Millennium Park in 2004. As Ryan points out, it's like the must do. It's kind of like the High Line today. Like you haven't been to New York till you've done the High Line and posted on Instagram. Same thing with the bean. And its technical name is not the bean, but it was installed by an Indian-born British sculptor whose name is Anish Kapoor, who named it technically Cloud Gate. Now, I'm still working on deciphering that, but I think we can agree as marketing minds, Ryan, the bean is a little catchier than Cloud Gate.
Yeah, I mean, Cloud Gate sounds like one of those Star Wars movies you'd make me watch.
One thing that I found interesting just reading up for the episode was that the exterior of Cloud Gate, or the bean, was actually inspired by the reflectivity of liquid mercury. And it does have that sort of that viscous liquid feel to it because of its curve, the curves all around it. It's a very cool and interesting thing you can actually look at. If you take a step back from it as a tourist attraction and really look at it as a piece of art, I think it's quite interesting. And Ryan, I don't think I've ever shared, we're so many years into this. We're still learning new things about each other. I bet you don't know that in my 8th grade chemistry class, I had a teacher who opened a vial of liquid mercury and poured it out on a student's desk, and they had to shut down the whole school for several weeks to decontaminate it.
Why would they do that?
She was an older lady. She was a bit of a drinker, and wow. It wasn't good. That's public school for you.
Yeah, well, that is not something that I saw coming.
Another thing that you mentioned was just the size of Millennium Park itself, just like how Central Park is, huge, and you could spend a day walking its perimeter. Millennium Park is huge, and Chicago itself is really, really big. So it's good to get yourself acclimated to either using the elevated rail system that they have, and that's another really... The L, yes, which is short for elevated rail system. Yeah. And that's a real quintessential part of Chicago, seeing the trains up above you and casting some nice shade onto the street. And but Millennium Park is really in this central tourist area. So Millennium Park, and then the neighborhood around it is called the Loop, which I never really thought deeply about that name. And I asked last time I was in Chicago, just about 6 weeks ago, I asked a friend who lived there, why do they call it the Loop? And it turns out it's because that's where the L trains all turn around. That's the Loop, and to get out to the rest of their tracks.
Yeah, that I didn't know. I thought it was just because it was literally a loop.
This is why I'm here for you, Ryan.
So there's a lot of other just kind of cool sculptures and stuff in Millennium Park, Kiernan. Like, they, much like Central Park, they have concerts there, they host movie screenings. But another thing that I like that is pretty hip is this thing called Crown Fountain, which is sort of a video. It's called a video sculpture. It's basically a large video screen that is also a fountain, and various faces appear on it and sort of spit water out at you from
yeah.
the screen.
It's very cheeky.
Yeah, and that's also was installed around 2004. So they must have done like a huge reno of Millennium Park during that time.
And if you're there on a particularly hot summer day, you can get right into the spit stream and cool down.
Yeah, it's the only time you're going to get spit on in Chicago. You're going to appreciate.
And sticking to the Millennium Park area, the Art Institute of Chicago, which we're going to talk about in a couple minutes, and then the Field Museum are both in that area. But there's another attraction that, I'm putting this in the 101 mostly because it's very easy to get to, and it's right in this same area as the Bean. It's called the Chicago Cultural Center. Chicago Cultural Center has different art galleries. It's a great place to pick up souvenirs from local artists. They have like a whole gift shop where they have local art and fun, everything from posters to postcards to toys to books. But what I like is something that's a real historical attraction that's hidden in there. And it's called the Tiffany Dome. And it sits, basically, you go in the main entrance, you go up, I think it's 2 floors, 2 staircases up, and these grand staircases that welcome you. And there's an area called the Preston Bradley Hall, and it's open. They do events there, but it's open to regular tourists. And above it is this huge, beautiful glass dome. And in fact, it's all made out of Tiffany glass. It's 1,000 square feet and has more than 30,000 pieces of glass in the sections across it. So this is the largest Tiffany dome that there is, and it is extraordinary. It's in this cast iron frame, and it's just sitting there in this building that you would walk by without even blinking unless you knew it was there.
Yeah, and what I learned about this from you in putting this together. I love Tiffany, and the fact that I haven't seen this is like reason to go back to Chicago ASAP for me. So this is very cool.
Yes, it's really very neat, and you will see some in the know tour groups going to visit them. So just follow them, or you can ask at the entrance, and they'll tell you where it is. All right. Well, the other thing while you're out walking around Millennium Park that I want to call attention to is called the Buckingham Fountain, like Buckingham Palace, but Buckingham Fountain. And this is in Grant Park, which is in this same area. And it was actually opened in 1927, and it's what's called a wedding cake style fountain. So as that might suggest, it has kind of stacked different layers that go up, and it is a show unto itself. It's just a massive, massive fountain that the water, there's so much water spraying that it's kind of loud in your ears. And it's a main gathering place in this area. And honestly, it's hypnotizing. You could spend hours and hours there just chilling with a book or watching the fountain. And it's one of these great sort of public fountains that I feel like we don't get enough of these days. And in fact, it drew inspiration from a fountain at Versailles, Ryan. So I know you're cultured, you're a bit of a Francophile, and so I think you've definitely got to get to Buckingham Fountain.
Yeah, no, that sounds beautiful. Another thing that I didn't really know about. And we talked a bit about
two things I should just say there. I do want to just say, though, if you do visit in those colder months, they do shut it down. So you need to catch it from April to October. And if you go at night, they do like light shows through the water there. So really, it was something to make sure if you're out exploring the lakefront, just keep an eye out, and it's not going to be hard to spot.
Okay, cool. No, that's good to know. We talked a bit about sports at the top of this. It's a huge.
You and me, we can't get through any conversation without talking about sports.
I know. And this reminds me of that '90s SNL sketch, The Bears.
Or the Bears, sure.
The Bears, but
in this case, we're talking about the Cubs.
Yeah, which is the baseball team. One of the two baseball teams. They've got the White Sox as well. But Wrigley Field, one of the most famous. I think one of the most famous baseball stadiums in America, which opened in 1914. And it's the second oldest Major League Baseball stadium in the country after, what's the oldest, I wonder, Kieran?
Oh, this is for our Boston fans here, after Fenway Park. But this is why I wanted to be sure to include it. One, I think that, you really can get a great feel of a city if you make time and have an afternoon to spend at a local sporting event. And just like no real trip to Boston is complete without visiting a Red Sox game at Fenway, you get a great sense of the local Chicago sports culture with a visit to Wrigley Field. And it does, because it is the second oldest in the country, it doesn't have that sort of sleek corporate feel that so many modern stadiums have. So it's a great use of time if you can make it to Wrigley Field, which is not terribly far outside of the main tourist area.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I've just sort of walked around Chicago and kind of bumped into it by accident, so it's sort of easy.
You gotta look up a little bit more, Ryan, on your phone.
I know.
Always swiping left.
Well, that's because I'm coming from Boys Town. So Chicago is a city that has a super vibrant gay life, and they have one of the more famous gay neighborhoods in the country, and they call it Boys Town. It's actually North Housted, or North Ousted, or something like that. I don't know, but it's colloquially known as Boys Town, and it's really just a street of just a bunch of Gay bars, gay friendly restaurants, boutiques selling, gay friendly things. Leather, that would be sort of stuff like that.
Sure.
So certainly, a cool place to visit if that's something that might interest you. One of my favorite places to hang out there is a place called Roscoe's Tavern, and it's actually a bar that first opened up in like the mid 1980s. So it's been there for a really long time, and it's got sort of the feel of a place that's been open that long. But they do karaoke nights and all sorts of fun stuff. In fact, I have so fond memories of our friend Samantha and me staying up way too late one work night at Roscoe's Tavern doing karaoke. So Boys Town, really cool, unique neighborhood that folks should check out if they're interested. And with that, Kieran, I think it's time to go into some of the museums because, Chicago's a real museum city.
Yeah, it certainly is a cultural mecca. And of course, I think you have to start with the Art Institute of Chicago. This is, I feel like for folks who haven't been to Chicago, probably the most famous thing they know about it is it's where Ferris Bueller went on his day off.
Is that what they know? I was going to ask you.
That's like a big famous scene, the three of them wasting time. But I just love he skipped school to go to the art museum. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, I think, one of the great art museums in the United States. It is so epic.
It is epic, and just like the Met and the British National Galleries museums, it is one of these overwhelming collections full of treasures. And something that I really admire that they do at the Art Institute of Chicago is they do have a map that you can get when you go in that is basically a tour of the greatest hits. And it's not just artworks that you'll know from art class or Western Civ. It's a good kind of walk through the full collection with representative pieces. And it does take you through most of the footprint of the museum. It's maybe a little light on the modern collection, which is quite large. But it is, if you only have an hour, if like after an hour and a half, you start to glaze over a little bit, this is definitely something I'd recommend for the Art Institute of Chicago.
Yeah, and this is definitely a museum, much like the Met, where you've got the full, pretty much the full, every single sort of period is covered here, and every single
and geography
country, exactly. Yeah, so it's not you can spend all day and very easily at the Art Institute if you want. But yeah, there are definitely cool guides to see some of the greatest hits. And some of the things that really stand out for me are things like the Water Lilies Room, the Monet, the Seurat Sunday in the Park, which I absolutely love and is an incredible painting to see in real life. But, I have to talk about the miniatures. They have a famous room full of miniature rooms. So it's a room full of miniature rooms, that is just so beautiful. And one of the things I love about this is that one of our favorite directors, Wes Anderson, whenever he is working on a new film, he will spend the day there walking around looking at these miniatures to come up with various ideas for how he's going to film those scenes.
Yeah, so this is in sort of the bottom floor of the museum. So if you enter, make sure you take time to go down. Don't miss these. They're called the Thorne Miniature Rooms, Thorne, and they were initially supposed to basically preserve interior. These were designed in order to give reference points for furniture and interior design in the Americas through different periods. And so it's I'm not Mr. Miniature, Ryan. That's you. But I will say there is something that is very playful, but also so amazing about the craftsmanship of these tiny little spaces that down to every little rug and every little piece of furniture is clearly well studied from an actual interior.
Yeah, and the woman, who designed these, there are only about 100 still in existence of these rooms. The majority of them are on display at the Art Institute. But folks might actually remember from our episode on Knoxville, Tennessee, that the Knoxville Museum of Art has 9 of them, and the rest are in Phoenix. So there's really just There's just those three museums that have the bulk of these 99 rooms, and the Art Institute has 68 of them. So this is really you're walking through time when you walk into this room.
Yeah. And what I found fun was that you can get rooms from the same period, but different places. And even within Massachusetts, they had several. They had like a Cape Cod house versus a Boston house. And it's fun. You can almost read in, the whole lifestyle of the family that frequent these spaces. But it also goes abroad. There's European interiors, and there's even a church or two.
Yeah, and different regions. Wealthy families, less wealthy families. It's definitely it is peak miniature. I think it's about as good as it gets if you're a miniature lover.
Ryan, you did quickly mention, but I'll just repeat: if you are looking for kind of what is the most famous thing to see in the museum, Sunday in the Park is definitely that's the pointillist painting, quite famous. That is made from tiny little dots of paint that show a really vibrant scene of well-dressed people on the shoreline enjoying a laid-back Sunday.
And an ordinary Sunday.
Ryan, I believe what you're mentioning there is a reference to Sunday in the Park with George. and that we should actually say a word about the theater scene in Chicago, because it actually is a terrific theater town.
Yeah, it's one of the great theater towns in the U.S. In fact, on any given time, there are actually more live theater happening in Chicago per capita than in New York. So there's just so much going on in Chicago for musicals, but it's also just, I think, in terms of just seeing, straight plays, just classic plays. They've got things like the Goodman, the Steppenwolf. These are just amazing cultural institutions where there's always something to see.
And Ryan, one of the other museums I want to make sure we talk about is the Field Museum. Now, I know you and I tend to not prioritize seeing natural history museums if you only have a limited amount of time and a space. And if you've been lucky enough to have time in a great natural history museum, the bones of one primate kind of look like the bones of another primate. You can see stuffed gazelles at a lot of these, but I would definitely recommend taking time to get to the Field Museum, which is at one of the far sides, the far reaches of the Millennium Park. And you can kind of group it with the aquarium if you want to get a full day of nature.
Yeah, I've never been to the Field Museum, but you tell me that it's it's one of the better natural history museums in the country.
Absolutely. And one of a couple of things that I'd call out about it that I love, and you can kind of help gauge whether this is for you or not. It's certainly a place to go with kids, where when you go in, there's a great courtyard right in the middle of it. I mean, it's covered, there's a roof, but it's a huge lobby area that gives you a sense of the scale of the space. And they've been very playful and hanging a whole bunch of like pterosaurs above you. So different variety of pterodactyls and flying dinosaur relatives above you. And there are huge displays of dinosaur bones and elephants. And it really gets you in the mood of ready to appreciate all the natural wonders inside. And for a kid, it's wonderful. I love, they have a full scale model of the largest flying reptile that ever lived. And, it towers above you. I think it was 12 feet large. I really think that going in without an agenda, just being open to what shows they have open. They also, of course, have a great permanent collection, is a good way to see the Field Museum. I also think the Field Museum is one of the best places to get a really special souvenir. So the Mold-O-Rama is this machine from the 1960s. There's only a few of them left around the country, and the Field Museum has, I think, 4. There might be 5. And it's this plastic injection machine where you put in a few dollars. I think it's $5, and it will custom mold a special plastic toy in a bright primary color. And they change out the different molds. So you can get several different plastic dinosaurs. I got a T-Rex and I got a Brachiosaurus. There are sometimes they have gorillas, sometimes they have Triceratops, and they are these great old school toys, and you actually see the plastic, injected into this mold, and the machine itself looks like something from 1960s. It's sort of Technicolor, and it kind of goes, you feel like there's like pistons moving inside. I mean, it's just this weird cultural artifact, and this little company still exists taking care of these moldoramas. And I'll include some background in the show notes. I'll definitely post to the Instagram at OOO podcast the video of my dinosaur being made in front of me. And when it comes out, and you take it, the plastic is still like sort of warm and melty on your hands. It's really something out of time. It's very cool.
And you said that there's only a few of these even in existence.
Yeah, there's a couple in Chicago, the Field Museum and a zoo that's outside of town. And there is a great Moldorama tracker website where you can see what the latest molds are, what color they're being made in, and where you can find it. So I've added to my bucket list trying to get a Moldorama from each of these sites. I'm just very enamored with these toys.
Well, that is a good bucket list. You have to do it before all the machines break down, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so whose bucket, yours or the machines? Yeah.
The other thing that you do have to see if you're at the Field Museum is they have one of the greatest Tyrannosaurus Rex skeletons in existence. It's one of the most complete ever found. Of course, they filled out the rest with models, and it's called Sue. They affectionately call it Sue. Has a great specialized gallery just to show off Sue. And the Tyrannosaur, that's obviously the first dinosaur every kid falls in love with. And the Field Museum is the quintessential place to see the T-Rex.
Then I do love a good T-Rex.
Ryan, there's one more museum I want to call out. And again, I was debating whether to put this in the 101, but it doesn't take long to get to. And it really speaks to the cultural richness of Chicago. So, of course, the University of Chicago is right in the city. It's not right near the tourist track area, but it's an extraordinary school in itself. And if you have time to walk its campus, you should definitely, it's worth the trip. But on the campus, there is a Frank Lloyd Wright house that you can take a tour of. It's called the Robie House, Robie. Are you familiar with the Robie House, Ryan?
I am not, but I love a Frank Lloyd Wright house.
So it's very cool. It's in the prairie style that is sort of Wright's trademark, and it kind of meets all the main characteristics of that style, especially long horizontal lines. So as you approach it, it's this long horizontal building. It has low, they appear to be flat like roofs, and these great sort of Art Deco-y feeling windows with a lot of geometric shapes in them that filter the lights so that it's kind of a soft light on the interior. It's a really neat place to go. It doesn't take long to tour, and if you don't know Frank Lloyd Wright's style, this is a perfect entry point to it. So there's tours 9 to 4. Thursday through Monday. So it's an end of the week and weekend sort of destination for you.
That's a super cool house. I definitely want to check that out when I'm back in Chicago.
And the other thing, Ryan, I mean, I know I fast for weeks before I go on any trip to Chicago because there's so much darn good food there.
Yeah, so let me talk about two of the things Chicago is famous for. I'll start with pizza. So Chicago style pizza is a deep dish pizza, thick, baked in a pan with layers of cheese and fillings like meat and vegetables and sauce. And it's usually 2 to 3 inches tall. Now, the first one of these that was ever made is at Pizzeria Uno. And believe it or not, the first ever Pizzeria Uno is in Chicago. You can go to it. It's got there's a plaque. A historic plaque on this Pizzeria Uno. There wasn't one of those in my hometown at the Pizzeria Uno. But Giordano's Pizza has been around since 1974. And they have my favorite Chicago deep dish pizza. But, this is one of those things like what's the best cheesesteak in Philly? There people will go on forever about where you get the best pizza in Chicago. But that is my favorite. Another thing that Chicago's known for, and me and Mitt Romney's favorite food, Kieran, is the Chicago style hot dog.
Oh, Mitt Romney, it's his favorite meat.
It is his favorite meat. And this includes mustard relish, celery salt, freshly chopped onions, sliced red ripe tomatoes, kosher pickle, and sport peppers piled in a perfectly steamed poppy seed bun. And they call this dragging the dog through the garden, which I think is really funny.
I think that's what Kristi Noem had to do after she took care of Cricket.
Exactly. And a lot of places you can get this dog. Portello's and Bornelli's. Portello's and Bornelli's Chicago, which is actually down by Millennium Park. It's a huge place where they serve open, those basically those sandwiches from the bear, the open face roast beef sandwiches. But they're also famous for this exact Chicago style hot dog. I recommend that. So I'll put a link in the show notes to both of those recommendations. But while you're in Chicago, make sure you get a hot dog and at least grab a slice of that pizza.
Yes, and I will say this competitive hot dog space in Chicago is a real thing. And there was a good Bon Appetit article not too long ago that gives you, if you really want to do a full hot dog tour, it's like 8 or 10 of the best places to go, and they all have variations on the style you described, Ryan. So
yeah, and I think
link to that in the show notes.
I think you'd have to take some Pepto-Bismol with you and eat 10 hot dogs. That's like
yes.
That's a lot of hot dogs.
There's a lot of higher end restaurants that are coming into style and opening and closing at all times. It's a super dynamic food scene in Chicago. One place, that I want to recommend is one thing I want to recommend is looking at a particular restaurant group. Because I've had a really good experience at several of their restaurants. And the restaurant group is called Hogsalt, Hogsalt, Hogsalt. And just super inventive, interesting cuisines. They really invest in the interiors of the restaurant. So they're all beautiful. Some are kind of quirkier. I went to one on my latest trip to, it was called Armitage Ale House. And it's made to look like a dark wood British pub. And it serves that kind of food too. And so it's a very atmospheric and fun. And I really think maybe in a deep winter night, it would be a fun place to visit. And I believe they even have a fireplace back in the main dining room, though. I was there in June, so they didn't have it lit that particular day.
I do love a fireplace.
The other place in, Armitage Ale House is one of the sort of more expensive and upscale restaurants that in the Hogsalt restaurant group, but they even have a donut shop. And I am not a huge donut eater generally. I mean, I like my fair share of sweets, but I like them for dessert primarily. But I had one of the best donuts of my life at this place called the Donut Vault. And as the name suggests,
Vault.
Yeah, the Vault. It is this tiny little store. I don't think they could fit more than 4 people in line in there. Super great service. They have a lot of daily specials. And I had a pistachio glazed donut, and it was extraordinary.
That sounds good. I mean, fancy donuts are, where it's at.
So, Ryan, we covered the major sites. I kind of gave an overview of the neighborhoods and the waterfront, museums, and the food. I mean, if that's not your first trip to Chicago, I don't know what is. I'm feeling pretty good about that guide. Yeah,
I think, folks will have plenty to do. And with that, I think it's time for the last stop.
The last stop.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the last stop on this train. Everyone, please leave the train.
All right, Ryan. Well, we're here in the last segment of the show, the final segment of the show. It's why it's called The Last Stop. It's my favorite segment. It's your favorite segment. It's popularly known as the people segment. And that's because it's where we come together as a community to share. And, we can share anything. It could be a souvenir, an anecdote, a little bit of a tip, something you heard on the corner, or it could be something that you've been studying for years. But the most important thing is it has to meet one simple criterion. It must inspire the spirit of wanderlust within us, even during the workaday week. I'm feeling workaday, Ryan. So I'm going to ask you, as I ask you every episode, do you have a last stop this week?
I recently found this Facebook group from Roadside America, which is a travel app of all sort of interesting things you can see when driving across the country. But what I love about this Facebook group is that people just post all the stuff they see sort of around the country when they're going on road trips. So, I'll just call out like the most recent ones. So right now they've got Colorado Springs has human-like egg statues placed all over town, and they have photos of these. Another one is the world's largest clothespin is in Philadelphia. Picture of a massive clothespin sculpture. There's a house in the shape of a shoe in York, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So, you're starting to see, kind of the kookiness. And I just love this because I just love sort of the zany sort of attractions, and that you can see driving across the country. And,
of course, this is like that Wigwam motel we saw.
Exactly like that Wigwam motel. I'm sure somebody has shared that here. There was even one earlier that is a replica of Jesus's tomb, but I can't find where that was.
That's a good one.
Yeah, but this is there's even a Stonehenge replica located somewhere in Kentucky. So there's just so much stuff. So
keep the climate protesters away from that. You see that recently?
Yeah, I did. Well, that's one that I think they can probably deface without.
Yeah, that's true. I'd rather they do the Kentucky one. Yeah.
Yeah. So Roadside America. I would love to actually have somebody on from the app to talk about some of these kooky sites. But
that's a fun idea.
A lot of Americana, and I'll drop a link, and folks can explore what they can see on their next road trip. Did you bring a last stop, Kieran?
I sure did. And this was inspired, Ryan, by a birthday present I received today from my dear wife, Catherine. And technically, she said it was from the kids, but they don't have an income. So I suspect she actually bought it. And it's a book called Footnotes from the Most Fascinating Museums. Footnotes from the Most Fascinating Museums. I'll throw it in the show notes. It is by an illustrator named Bob Eckstein. And the premise of it is that he visited 75 museums across America, and he created artwork inspired by the museums. And he gives fun little facts and profiles of the museums. So it goes, huge museums like the Met, all the way down to museums you've never heard of. So, for example, the Neon Museum in Las Vegas, which is just a collection of old classic neon signs. And me, I have such a weakness for quirky museums. And this just takes it one step further because he makes this really beautiful artwork. I love his style. It's very colorful and vibrant. And, he captures a moment in time in each of these museums. And it was inspired by his own travels. He had a great interview with the New York Times where he said he started with a list of 150 possible museums. He got it down to 75, and that was how he spent a year or more getting this book ready for publication. I just love it.
This sounds like something you would have written.
I wish I had the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of Kieran writing, we've long promised the interview with you about your new book, Secret Boston, that comes out on August 1st. August 1.
August 1.
So next episode, I'm going to sit down and it's going to be a tough interview, Kieran. It's not going to be, some friendly interview. I'm going to get down to the bottom of Boston.
This isn't going to be a George Stephanopoulos Biden sort of interview. This is going to be hard hitting. It's going to
be hard hitting. So,
I am prepared. I'm excited. It was fun to write it. It's even fun to be done writing it. And this is exciting. We've talked about Boston, but we've hardly scratched the surface.
I'm excited to go deep with you. And until then, I'm Ryan Davis.
I think you said that the first time we met. And I'm Kieran Schmidt.
And this is Out of Office, a travel podcast.
This seat taken.
The Bears.
Come on.